I only finished 4 books for the month of February, but the month of February was a really good month for me. All of the books that I'm going to share with you were either a 4 or a 5 star, are very underhyped, and probably haven't heard from them or at least not too much. Now the first one and my 5 star of the month, and I really enjoyed this book to the point where I didn't want it to end, is The Lake of Lost Girls by Katherine Greene. I know she has another book that I want to read next, but I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It is a thriller, it is a mystery, and on top of that, I really enjoyed the writing style and the audiobook. So if you are going to try to read this book and you enjoy audiobooks, I think even if you can't find it in your local library, I think this is the kind of audiobook that, in my opinion, is worth buying because it adds so much to the atmosphere and the experience. Now, this book contains a podcast element, and the podcast, it's like a whole production with different narrators. It really is a well put together book, so I think you should listen to the audiobook if you enjoy audiobooks, of course, and if not, the book itself will really grab your attention to the point that you can't really put it down. Now, this is the story of Jessica, who is moving out of her home and into her dorm. Now, her college is not too far away, but because of a little situation with her parents, she decides that she wants to move into her dorm and just go visit her family, even though they really live very close to her college. Now, one day she decides to go visit her sister because it's her sister's birthday. So she gets a cake, gets in her car, and actually enter her home. And then she goes back to the car to get the birthday cake, and that's when she vanished. Now, this is a very interesting way of disappearing because her sister was looking out the window, but she turned for 10 seconds, which is the podcast name, 10 Seconds to Vanish. I think that's the name. And you know, in those 10 seconds, Jessica disappears. Now, her sister is only 6 years old. Then we fast forward to when she's almost 30, like in her late 20s, the younger sister, and Jessica is still missing. But there is this podcast that is bringing some life back to this cold case that not only involves Jessica, but 3 other girls that were also freshmen and that they disappear around the same time. Now, this story will keep you guessing who did this, who took these girls, and what they did to these girls. I thought that the author did a really good job shifting the narrative. You do get quite a few suspects, like a creepy teacher, like, you know, a family member, the boyfriend of one of the girls, and all these different people that look very shady. And I think the author does a great job kind of making them look a certain way. But then at the end, one of those suspects, at least that I had in my head, was the one that took them. But you can't really tell until the very end of the book, which I thought it was a really smart way to keep me coming back to this book and being engaged in the whole story. So even though I was able to guess who did it, I also had a couple of other guesses. Like, I wasn't 100% sure that one person did it. And I thought it was a really smart way to write this book, to keep you guessing while you're going through the chapters. Now, I think I only heard another person talking about this book and thinking that she was going to, or maybe it was something that she was predicting to be in Book of the Month or something like that. I remember somebody else talking about this book. I already had it in my NetGalley library, and like I said, to me, I'm just so sad that it took me this long to read this book because it's truly amazing, and I think you should read it and thank me later, especially if you enjoy a full cast in an audiobook. And if you're in a reading slump, you want to read a fast-paced book that will keep you guessing, I think this will do for you. The next one I have a review, so I'm not gonna expand too much about it, but this is Things We Do in the Dark. I mentioned that this book opens with a scene where there's a dead older man in the bathtub, his new wife with what possibly could be the murder weapon, and they ask her if she killed him, and she said she doesn't remember, or she doesn't know. Now, I thought that it sounded interesting, and as I read the first chapters of this book, it kind of follows her as she's going through the motions, going to, you know, jail, and the lawyer, and this and that, and it seemed very straightforward. Like, I was able to think, you know, maybe this person did it, or maybe this is why she did it. But as you read it, it changes the story completely. It goes back in time, and 80% of the book it takes in the past, and then brings us to the case itself. I thought it was a really smart way to read this book. If you read just a few chapters like I did, and I actually DNF'd it for a while, then I think you should keep reading. That's what I was told. And once I started to go through the past, and it started confusing me to the point where I'm like, well, really? Okay, so maybe it's not her, or maybe it's not this other woman, or maybe it's not. So I started second guessing myself, and it made it so much interesting. Now, at the end of the book, when you think that everything was resolved, and, you know, whatever happens at the end of the trial, you learn really who did it. And I suspected the person initially, but the book is about to end, and the last few pages, all these things get revealed, and I thought it was really good. So definitely, if you haven't read it, I know Jennifer Hillier is very popular for Jar of Hearts or Little Secrets or something like that, but I think this was a solid book. And if you haven't read it, I think you should try, because it kind of introduces you of her way of writing, and I think it's very particular and kind of different of at least my favorite thriller authors. Now, this is the one that was popular at the time. I had it in my collection. I needed something fast-paced, and I figure I read this. So you probably know about this book. This is Everyone Here Is Lying. This is a domestic thriller, which is not my favorite thing, but I like Shari Lapena's writing style, and I think that she can write, you know, domestic thrillers in a way that I still get invested in them. So it opens with a scene of a doctor who is meeting his mistress, who is also a co-worker, or somebody he works with, I should say, and they're having an affair. She decides to end it that day. He goes home. He really doesn't want to end this relationship. He's even thinking about leaving his wife and his kids. But he gets home, he's really upset, and he just finds his daughter home. And she is only 9 years old, and you're thinking, well, she's at home. Of course she's at home. No, she's home from school early. She should have stayed home. She had some kind of practice after school, but she decides to leave, get the extra key from under the mat, and decides to go home even though she shouldn't have done that. The dad loses his patience, and I think slaps her harder than he should have. Not that slapping is a good thing, but it was more than a simple slap. The girl looks at him like he's the devil. He leaves the home for whatever reason, and then when her brother is going to pick her up from choir, she is not there, and he calls his mom, and that's how they start looking for her. Now, what this book does, and what really kept me engaged, is, again, her writing style is she shifts the narrative and shows you how messy different people are and how they could have done it. But then, you know, you just have an idea of who could have done it, but the ending of this book was kind of crazy. And I gave it 4.5 stars because of the ending, because it's one of those tropes that I don't... Unhinged anything is not for me. So even though I thought that this, and especially when we're talking about kids, you know, it's just one of those things that really doesn't click in my head that well. But the book itself, I enjoyed so much. in that I really didn't care that the ending was not what I was expecting, and I thoroughly enjoy it. So if you haven't read it, maybe it's your sign and you should. Then finally I read, well, actually I think it was the first book that I read that month, but is Megan Goldin's Stay Awake. And this is a story of a woman that wakes up in the back of a cab, and the driver says, you know, we're here. She gets down, goes to what she thinks is her apartment, knocks on the door because she doesn't have her keys, and there's a couple that tell her that she doesn't live there, that they've been living there for at least a year and that she doesn't live there anymore. She explained that she lives with her roommate and gives them the name, and you're like, well, we get mail for that person, but no, I mean, we live here. So she leaves there, she starts wondering, and she reads in her hands something that she wrote to herself that says, stay awake. Every time you fall asleep, you forget everything. Now, at the same time, there is a police investigation, and there is a detective that is investigating this crime scene where this man was killed, and there's something written in blood that says, stay awake. There are cameras eventually that showed that she was around. But did she really do it, or is somebody framing her for this? And why is she forgetting things every time she falls asleep? Now, I don't like the amnesia kind of trope. I think it's very overused for what I call lazy writing. But in this case, I thought that you know, the explanation why she keeps forgetting the last 2.5 years of her life and goes back to when she was living in that apartment, when she was living with her roommate, and forgets what happened in the last 2.5 years. I thought it was really good what happened 2.5 years ago that traumatized her so much that it kind of developed this condition. And I thought that the amnesia trope was used in such a smart way that I truly enjoy this book, and it was definitely a 5-star. So tomorrow I'm gonna share with you I almost finished in the month of February books. I'm gonna tell you why I didn't finish those books and if I'm planning to finish them or not, and that way we'll kind of wrap up the month of February in reading. So thank you so much for being here today, guys. Truly appreciate it. If you enjoyed this content, please remember to subscribe, like this video, leave a comment down below and say hello. I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.